was good news is that people were already in the path to work off campus, so we could transition to a snow day very easily. So that's cool. I noticed there was lots of schools that were still closed. I wonder if they weren't able to transition that quickly. So we're here today to chat about what has been really valuable this year that we would like to keep as we move into a more normal, maybe, time period in the near future. And so we really appreciate you being here. If you're open to turning your cameras on, it just helps us to see who's with us and so forth and see one another. So you may want to share any structures that have been helpful this year with teens, that once we go back to more typical school, that we think, gosh, we want to really consider putting that into place, or any activities that you love that would be helpful to continue. Any new procedures that you recommend we should use moving forward. If you don't like an idea that someone else shared, which has happened in a few of the other town halls, we ask for our children and teens to do, we ask you to gracefully share another idea that you think might work for the whole community. If you have more specific thoughts for your specific teen, we encourage you to probably hold those for studio teachers and advisors. We don't want to talk about individual kiddos during this conversation, but please feel free to reach out to them or me, and we'll be happy to understand more about what your thoughts are about that. So anyway, thank you again for coming. I will tell you that the staff is already thinking a lot about the best way, I think, to teach in a pandemic is to see everything as an opportunity. And so we have found lots of things that we thought were opportunities for moving forward. For example, using the Google Classroom was something that the Woods teens used pretty regularly, and now it's being used throughout the whole building, and every level is thinking about how we might use it moving forward. And so that's something that we're considering, as well as PPCs being able to be virtual, at least for some of the PPCs. We want to make sure that there's still a way for families to, sometimes the only time they ever come in the building is for PPCs. So we're thinking about how do we manage that goal of keeping people comfortable with coming in the building, at the same time knowing that it's really difficult for working families, which we have such incredible families that somehow make it all happen with multiple children. But that being the virtual component of that most certainly has a place moving forward. So the rest of this conversation is really just to hear from you. Let us know about what things that have gone really well that you want to make sure that we continue and that we know about. Many of you have given feedback all throughout the year, which has been super helpful, but we thought kind of as a rebirth, a renewal in January, it might be helpful just to get together as a whole group. So opening up the floor now. Sorry, my light went off on me. And Melissa will open up the chat. You're welcome to chat any of your thoughts, or you're welcome to unmute and share them with the group. Either way, we'd love to hear. So anybody want to start? Anybody have something that you think might be helpful? So many things you don't even know what to start with, I'm sure. Well, I'll tell you, one of the conversations we've had kind of on and off is about, a full-time off-campus kind of process for teens. And we've thought about the downsides of that, and we've thought about the upsides of that. Most certainly there have been teens this year that families have said and advisors have said have thrived in this situation. So we want to be conscious about those pieces. And in addition to that, we know that if a teen at our school, once we're back to typical school, is never on campus, they will miss a lot of the experience that we've created that makes us unique and we think helps young people to thrive. And so, we, as you know, don't like to do anything at the school that we don't feel is what we can do well. And this particular way of being, if we don't have teens ever in the building, we wonder how well we can do that. We have bounced around the idea for, probably 10 years about if we wanted to have kind of a full-time off-campus in addition to community Montessori for teens. And so having a couple of people that were dedicated just to that. Melissa Wiesinger and I are actually looking at a grant right now to see if we want to do that, and if we want to do that, how and when. And we've talked about that as the teen staff as well. But I know that the island staff is really worried about that part, because the social development of especially that early adolescent is so dependent upon social development amongst emotional development. And how can we do that well, as a school and as a Montessori school, et cetera. So any thoughts on any of that from the group? Pam is unmuting. We're welcoming her thoughts. We cannot hear you if you're talking, Pam, so we can't see you either, but maybe you're there. There she is. Is the mute struggling? Danielle, what's the control something?
You can type in the chat too as well, Pam, if that's easier. I see you.
Oh, I forget what the control is. I feel like it tells you if you hover over the mute button with the...
Yeah, I was going to say.
Control D.
Perfect. Okay, there we go.
But she says she'll chat, so she's going to type it in over here. I'll read it to you.
What we found over time is that when that happens to us, we leave a group and come back, and sometimes it writes itself. There's interesting things that happen in this video chat world that we've all learned over time. And so sometimes shutting down your computer, Glenn will say, I have way too many tabs open all the time. There's a lot to do.
Pam must be typing away over there. I'm waiting for the message. There it goes. Allowing learners to stay home while sick and still interact via online would be great.
Yeah. And, I think just so you guys know, one of the conversations the teen staff had, because, there's so many layers to this. And most certainly, teens do that now. What we've added this year is that all of the parts of the lessons are in the woods specifically are being recorded. I think in the islands too. Is that true, Danielle? Maybe you know that.
I don't think it's as consistent.
Okay. But anyway, so if a teen misses a math lesson, for instance, they can go and review it. Some of the math lessons are being done in kind of a flipped classroom way. So they watch the video first, and then when they come to the group, it's not really a lesson, it's a working time. So they might go in different rooms and work in groups, and then the teacher's there. And so they kind of work through the struggle or the problems or the process. But what we were talking about is that if I'm teaching algebra and right now, because everyone's online, I can use a lot of different strategies, because I'm doing things like what's called Nearpod, which like little activities where they might start filling out a problem, and then everyone kind of sees how everyone's doing with it or give feedback. And I can use a document reader camera so everyone can see me. But once kids get back in the building in real form, then we talked about, well, what would that look like? Because if someone was at home, and even though the teacher might still record it, it wouldn't be the same experience, because it wouldn't be as engaging. Right now, the wood staff and island staff has been super intentional about being engaging in this format. versus just having people move all around the room. So you can imagine if a kiddo is sick and they might have a video, but it really is just like a camera in the room. There's not any way really for them to engage. And so we were kind of talking about like what the benefit is of that, but it still would give them some way to interact, or to, again, pull back up a humanities lesson so that they could hear, some of the conversation and maybe not all of it. Does that make sense? Yeah. Other thoughts from the group?
Pam put in the chat a little more here too. She said also Island's use of Google Classroom for assignments has really helped with organization and accountability for work for my learner. The multi-week, multi-assignment study guides are a big challenge, and the due dates and descriptions continually available in Classroom are helpful.
Yeah. And I wonder, Pam, maybe you have a thought, or someone else on the call does. I know Islands has kind of experimented with creating new classrooms throughout to try to give a reset so that it doesn't all kind of build up. Some people, I'm curious if families have found that helpful or confusing, or if there's any feedback about that.
Jennifer said, I agree with what Pam just said. Islands has done a great job with online learning. And then Pam said she doesn't see the classroom itself, but we'll have to ask her child or kiddo. And then we have a learner on, found that helpful. Who found that helpful?
And there is, they have the information about the teen town hall, Melissa, already for next week.
It's actually going to be Wednesday, February 3rd at the same time at noon.
Yeah. So if your teen or learner is with you, remind them that is also a time for them to come and share their thoughts moving forward. We really just wanted to make sure that they were given a time for voice as well.
And that is both Islands and Woods teens, so everybody knows. So
yeah. Anybody else in the group have some thoughts or feedback that would be helpful for us moving forward? I'm sure some of you are multitasking right now, maybe for your lunch break. But if you have anything that you want us to consider, we'd love to hear from you. Danielle or Tracy, anything else you want to share that we've been talking about that you think might be helpful for the group?
I think at the Woods level, we discussed quite a bit about how we are currently using Wednesdays as advisory days, and kind of honing that into one day. And I think we have gone as far to acknowledge that it's been really helpful, but we haven't quite figured out exactly how to make that happen, or if that's feasible when we go back to the typical day and week. But that's a conversation we're having.
Yeah.
The overall success of virtual advisories versus in-person advisories.
Yeah. Do you anticipate that's something that might stay, Danielle, when they're across the room?
Right. Well, I think if they're in the physical space, that becomes a bit more difficult with a room of 20 or 40 kids, depending on what time of day it is.
Yeah. What we've learned is when both people unmute on the same call, it gives a lot of feedback if you're very close too. So we are naturally socially distancing when that's happening. I hope people aren't like talking up a storm right now and they're muted and they didn't know and they think we're listening. Any other thoughts from the group before we end our time together? Okay, well, I'll stay on a minute if anyone has anything that they want to chat about afterwards. But we really appreciate you coming, and thanks for taking the time to come on the call and listen and be a part of the conversation. We really appreciate it.